Welcome, North Point. How are we doing today? Oh, it's a rowdy crowd here in Springfield. Whether you're watching from here in Springfield, whether you're hanging out down in Nixa or the Dream Center or the rowdy crew in Republic, we're thankful that you shared part of your weekend here with us. And today we're wrapping up a series that we've been in for about 7 weeks called Find and Follow. And today I'm excited because we're going to talk about a man who, he's known more by a label than his name. And labels are kind of weird, aren't they? But have you ever noticed that we all end up with them? I'm not talking about the kind of label that's on your birth certificate or your driver's license, but I'm talking about the ones that actually stick, the ones that we're called. I've had a lot of labels growing up. Some of them I'm proud of. This one I'm proud of. This is Mr. Snacks Guy. I was known as Snacks because who doesn't like snacks, right? Like, that's a great name to have. I'll tell you where I got that one. It happened at kids camp. I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I'm kind of an entrepreneur. And so I'm, as a 7-year-old, I'm at camp, and I'm kind of taking the landscape in, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, I'm noticing something here. There's a snack bar, and it's open for 2 hours in the afternoon and an hour at night. And I'm pretty sure kids want snacks all the time. So I opened up my own snack bar, but here's the kicker. My snack bar was open when the actual snack bar was closed. And then I charged what would be called a convenience fee. Double the price of the snack bar. But what are you going to do? If you want your Skittles, you're going to pay the man, right? You're going to pay the man. And I was doing quite well. In fact, after a couple of days, I was looking at the wealth that I had amassed. I'm like, I think I could probably buy them out of something. And so I went down to the snack bar. I was like, hey, I'd like all your Snickers. And the guy's just like, okay. And I grabbed the Snickers off and dumped them. He's like, no, I think you misheard me. I think what you heard was I want a lot of Snickers. What I actually said was, I want all your Snickers. It's like, okay. So we went back to the back and got the case that they had, and dropped it, and I bought them all out. And this was a game changer for me because there's this little thing called supply and demand. And now the price for Snickers was $5. And this was many years ago. And you would be amazed at how many 7-year-olds bought Snickers from me. I did quite well. Kids, don't do that this year. By the way, kids camp and student camp is coming up very soon. If you haven't registered your kids, make sure you do that. But don't do that at our camp this year. Don't do that. And then unfortunately in middle school, when it comes to labels, it's often the most traumatizing thing that's ever happened to you in life, right? Like, that's the kid that pooped his pants in math class, Mr. Poopy Pants. That was not me. Just to be clear, you did not see another label put on. I did not do that. I was there. I smelt it, but I was not the culprit. Or, hey, that's the kid that threw up on his girlfriend. Now, that one was me. It's an interesting story. We were getting ready to march in a parade, and before we marched in a parade, we rode some rides. And I just remember having this. And then I did something I shouldn't have done. I turned to my girlfriend that was sitting with me, and then she had to march in the parade. That was the last time that she talked to me. I don't know. Love was not deep. But labels, they never really go away, do they? I mean, sometimes they change. But I'm sure you probably have labels for people at work, don't you? Like, hey, that's loud sneezer girl. Like, every time she sneezes, we're like, you do. You have these labels. Or that's Mr. Close Talker, and you're always kind of like standing at a distance with a mint, like, read the room, buddy, read the room. And sometimes labels, they're funny. Sometimes they're flattering. But sometimes they hurt. Sometimes we get known for one thing, one moment, one mistake, or maybe one season in our life. And here's the problem with labels. Labels are sticky. They don't just stick to your clothes, but they stick to your soul. And if you wear it long enough, it becomes a part of your identity. Maybe you walked in here today with a lot of different labels. Maybe maybe your label's this one, rage machine. You ever met somebody like that? There was that one time they blew up, and it's never been the same, right? Or maybe this one, an addict. Maybe during a season of pain in your life, you reached to something that was just like, well, I just need to take the edge off, and now it owns you, and so now you got a label. Maybe this one is yours, lazy. Maybe you got fired from a job one time, and now everybody knows you as, well, that's the lazy guy. I don't know what label you walked in here with today, but here's what I want to ask. What if that's not the end of your story? What if that's not the end? And if you can relate to any of that, I think you're going to relate to the man in our story today. It's found in Luke chapter 5. And Luke chapter 5 is one of the more colorful chapters in the book of Luke. And in fact, probably in all the Gospels, because there's just so many encounters between Jesus and outsiders in the book, or in the chapter, Luke chapter 5. And it's an amazing thing when Jesus encounters outsiders, because it doesn't usually go the way that we think it's going to go. Let's pick up in our story, Luke chapter 5, verse 27. It says this: After this, Jesus went out and saw a tax collector by the name of Levi. Everybody say Levi. He was sitting in his tax booth. Follow me, Jesus said to him. So our story begins with an invitation to look back. It starts with after this. And so we have to ask the question, well, what is he talking about after this? Well, Luke chapter 5, it starts with this, like the original calling of the disciples. It begins with Jesus' first invitation to be a part of the OG, the 12 disciples. Now, I don't know about you and what your experience is about being picked in things. I want you to think back for just a moment to elementary gym class. Some of you are triggered right now because you're thinking about that time you downed your friend's chocolate milk and your chocolate milk, and then you got to gym class and you're like, surprise, surprise, it's mile day, right? And then it just didn't end well for you. But don't think about that day. Think about a different day, right? Think about a different day where you're lining up and there's two captains that have been selected and they're on the baseline and they're getting ready to pick their teams, and all the kids are like flexing, pick me. Guys, you don't know the fight. Look at me. I was never chosen first, okay? Get it? I've never chosen, unless it was limbo day. If it was limbo day, I was always picked first. But generally speaking, when someone's choosing their winning team, you'd think, well, they're probably picking from the who's who, right? Being chosen by a rabbi was a big deal. It didn't just happen. You didn't just slide into your rabbi's DMs like, hey, let's collab. That's not how it worked back then. In fact, there was a whole process that took place. And some of those things are in your app if you want to do a little bit of studying on your own this week, but it's just a fascinating process. And there was a whole set of stages that would take place. And by the time you got to the end, for a Jewish boy who went all the way through the process and became an adult, most of them had been filtered out. Most of the ones, because at the very end, what would happen is the rabbi, if he thought you had what it took, if you had the stuff, he would invite you to follow him. He would say, follow me. And so most rabbis, they would begin around the temple, as you would, right? But that's not where Jesus started when we look at the beginning of Luke chapter 5. He started around some stinking fishing nets when he called Peter, James, and John. And so when our story said after this, that's what just happened. And if you're reading the story, you're like, okay. Maybe Jesus has done a little bit more film study than we have. He's kind of pulling an Andy Reid here, like he sees something like the Patrick Mahomes style, something. They're overlooked, but man, these guys, they're going to be franchise changers. I need these guys on my team. So it's like Peter, James, and John. It's like, okay, we'll give you the benefit of the doubt, Jesus. And then he's getting ready to pick his next pick. And so Jesus, the rogue rabbi, for the second round of the picks, Levi. And Peter, James, and John are like, Jesus. Shoot. I mean, that's like waking up and finding out Aaron Rodgers is still your quarterback, right? It's like, this is a bad day. Because, well, Levi, we just found out what his label was, right? He was a tax collector. That's who he is. And he was a tax collector in the crudest sense. I don't want you to think about like someone working for the IRS in a cubicle processing W-2s all day. I want you to think about maybe somebody that works for the IRS had a baby with a payday loan shark. That's Levi. And in Levi's day, the Roman government, they outsourced the tax collection. They didn't take the taxes themselves, but they outsourced it to the highest bidder. So if you bid enough, you could open up your snack bar, right? And you can charge whatever you want. Because as long as the Roman government got theirs, they didn't care what you did or how you did it or how you got it, as long as they got what was theirs at the end of the day. And Levi, well, he lived in Capernaum, which is a busy fishing community on a major trade route. Like, do you see the irony here? Like, he called a few fishermen, and then he says, hey, follow me. And then he walks over to the man that robbed them blind day after day after day and says, hey, I'm going to invite Levi for the party too. That's what just happened. And here's the kicker. Levi was Jewish. And he was collecting taxes from his own people on behalf of Herod Antipas, a Roman-backed ruler. And so that made him a traitor in the eyes of his community. He was absolutely skimming off the top, 100%. Mark it down, it was happening. Because the corrupt system of the day allowed for it. Everybody knew he was doing it, but they couldn't do anything about it. In the Mishnah and the Talmud, these are Jewish rabbinic writings, tax collectors are listed next to murderers and traitors. To be a tax collector, you couldn't even testify in court. Out of the question. Because they knew they could not trust any words that are coming out of your mouth. And so you couldn't even testify in court about something you saw. You were unwelcome in the synagogue. You couldn't go to places of worship. In fact, you couldn't even make change with the tax collector. Like if you wanted to buy some Snickers or something, like you can't even make change with the guy because it was just known that everything he has, he got from robbery and stealing from his own people. And even Jesus hinted at this. In the Sermon on the Mount, it's found in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus is talking to the crowd, and Jesus is telling his people that are out there following. He says, if you love people that love you, like what good is that? Even the tax collectors do that. Even the tax collectors do that. So in Jewish thought, there was one person considered to be unforgivable. Unforgivable. Beyond God's mercy, beyond the hope of salvation. Put it this way in your notes, that Levi represented the biggest sinner in town. And if you miss that, well, you miss what this story means. Because Levi wasn't just disliked. He was despised. He was hated. Levi didn't just break religious rules, he broke relationships, trust, cultural loyalty. And Jesus walks up to his little tax booth, to the most despised and hated person in town, and says, Levi, you're just who I've been looking for. Follow me. Classic Jesus move. His entire ministry was about finding the outcasts and inviting them in. And it begs the question, what would change in your life today if you actually believed that Jesus doesn't just tolerate you, but he calls you, and he loves you, and he wants you to follow him? What would change? See, Jesus' invitation isn't based upon where you've been or what you've done or what labels you have. It's not based on who you are. It's not. It's based on who he is. Verse 28 says this, and Levi got up, left everything, and followed him. Now, when Peter, James, and John were called, they left some stinking fishing nets. And don't mishear, I'm not suggesting that wasn't a big deal. That was a big deal. They left their livelihood, right? They left their trade. They left all that they knew. So I'm not saying that wasn't a big deal. But what I am saying is that if you follow the journey of Jesus through the Gospels, you get to a point where the crucifixion takes place. And there's a moment after the crucifixion where all the disciples, all of the followers of Jesus scattered. And then after the resurrection, Jesus goes looking for his disciples. And where does he find Peter, James, and John? Nets in hand, boats in the water, like nothing had ever happened. But Levi, he wasn't leaving a boat. He was leaving a booth, one with Roman backing, big income, status, security. Because you better believe that someone was in his little tax booth by sunrise the next morning, because the Roman government wasn't going to have that. They were going to get theirs. Of all the disciples, of all of them, Levi gave up the most. He was wealthy beyond comparison. And he left everything and followed. You know, we've been in this series, Find and Follow. And as we wrap it up today, Levi teaches us something profound, and it's this. It's really hard to stay and follow. It's really hard to stay and follow. But we try, don't we? Right? We want Jesus and backup plans. We want a transformation, but we don't want a transition. We want Jesus to step into our story, but we don't want him to change our surroundings. And we're caught in this moment between following Jesus and staying. And we tend to do this, don't we? We come and find Jesus, and then we come and find Jesus, and then we come and find Jesus. And all the while, Jesus is saying, follow me. I've come that you would have life, and life to the fullest, but you've got to follow me. You've got to let go. Got to let go. Because eventually, Jesus walks away from the tax booth. And you have to decide, are you going to follow? So what is your tax booth today? What is Jesus asking you to leave behind today? Don't mishear me. I'm not suggesting that following Jesus is a parade of perfect people. I mean, look around. That's not what this is. But what I am saying is that when it comes to a life following Jesus, there is a moment that we have to decide, are we going to stay or are we going to follow? Are we going to find Jesus? And then are we going to follow him to wherever he takes us? And no matter where you are in your journey, whether you've been following Jesus for one day or 60 years, you have a next step today. You do. You do. We do. We have next steps. That's why it's a journey. That's why it's following Jesus. It looks different every day. In verse 29, it says this, then Levi held a great banquet, not just any banquet, a great banquet for Jesus at his house, and a large crowd of, what does it say? Tax collectors and others were eating with him. The very first thing Levi did, he invited the scummiest people he knew to go sit down at a table with Jesus. So Levi went from collecting to connecting, from the booth to the banquet. I wonder what the nameplates were like. Have you ever been to any of those fancy parties? Any been in a fancy party where you got like nameplates? I wonder what they look like. Any of you gone to the Dream Center Gala? Like Jody and her team. Oh, if you ever get invited to the gala for the Dream Center, you should totally go. It's a lot of fun. I was able to go this last fall, and it is awesome. It's awesome. But this wasn't that. Like, that's not what this was. And it wasn't like a 30 under 30 or a 40 under 40. I don't know when they stop. I'm thinking maybe if I could live to be 120, I might hit the mark. Like, well, there's only 119 other people, so congratulations, you made it. 120 under 120. But that wasn't this. But it is kind of fun to think about. I wonder what their nameplates were like. Because I know what it's like to wear the kind of label that you pray no one sees. Maybe you walked in here today hoping no one sees. This is a safe place. I've sat at that table. Some of you know my story. At a very young age, I had this feeling that, like, man, I feel like I'm wired to do this, wired to do ministry. And when I was young, I thought that this what was ministry was, right? Like, and as I got older, I started to realize that ministry isn't so much what happens on a stage as much as it's what happens in the shadows. But at a young age, I was like, man, I got to chase this. I've got this pull. And so even when I was in high school, I went to Nixa High School, go Eagles, Republic, stop it, stop booing, I hear you. But I went to Nixa, and while I was there, I led a high school Bible study, and I was the kid carrying his Bible. Yeah, that was me. And as I went through high school, it dawned on me, it's like, I got to get out of here as quick as I can. So I actually went through faster than I should have, and I graduated early. Not because I'm smart, but just because, like, I got to go do that. I got to go do what I'm supposed to do. So I started Bible college at Central Bible College. Some of you know, but it used to be up by the fairgrounds. Rest in peace, Central Bible College. They've been absorbed by Evangel at this point. But I started there when I was 17. It was unfortunate. I looked 12 at the time. So everybody was like, who's this little kid? Like, who invited their little brother to college today? But even when I was there, I was like, man, I got to get through this as quick as I can. And so I didn't take breaks. Summer, man, I was in summer school. When there was a week where it was like spring break, and I crammed one more class into that week because, man, I got to get to where I'm supposed to go. And so at the end of my college career, I had a decision to make when it comes to marriage. So I was looking around, I was like, well, this is what you do, right? I mean, you get married, and then you go off into ministry. And I was way too young. I was not ready. I got married at 19. Soon after that, I graduated. I had a major in Bible and pastoral ministry, and I launched into ministry in the great state of Arkansas. And some of you are like, oh, pray for him, pray for him. And I was so alive, but I was so dead. Because I was in a marriage that was broken from I do. I recognized it immediately. Like, this is broken. This is not healthy. And when that happened, I came to this conclusion. Well, what had been kind of like imprinted in my mind is that if anything happens here, then that disqualifies you from ministry. You can't do that. If anything happens here, you can't do that. If anything happens here, you can't do that. And so I did what I did, and I slapped a smile on my face, and everything is awesome. But I was hurting. And I got to the point where I was numb, and then something happened that, to me, that, man, it cut through the numbness, and it just broke me. And I shattered inside. And in that moment, I made a decision. What do hurt people do? They hurt people, don't they? And I used the pain in my life to justify stepping out of bounds in my marriage. I had an emotional affair. Got a new label that day. One that I didn't think I'd ever wear, cheater. And as that played out, I came to a point, I was like, man, I gotta step away. I gotta resign. I can't keep doing this, and gotta resign and walk away from this situation. And ultimately, I resigned. It became very public, very known. One of the great things the church did, though, is I actually didn't have to pack my office. It was just something they kind of did for me. I showed up, and all my stuff was in trash bags by the door. Like, there you go. Don't let the door keep you on the way out. So I just remember in that moment, just like feeling like, man, that I thought this was why the church was here. Like, to help people that are hurting, and I am so hurting right now. I moved back and came back to where home is. This is almost 20 years ago. Came back to the area, and as I mentioned, Nixa is where I went to school, and came back, and ultimately I ended up filing for divorce, and I got a new label, divorced. A label I never thought I'd wear. But I do. I wear it. That's who I am. One day I was doing the dad thing. Any of you do the dad thing, where you're like sometimes oblivious to what's going on in your surroundings? Like my boys were upstairs, and I wasn't really paying attention to what was happening. And one day Corbin came downstairs. I think Corbin is here today. Yeah, there he is. He came downstairs with his younger brother, Cannon. And man, he was really proud. He got a hold of some Sharpie markers. You see where this is going? Yeah, you do. He got a hold of some Sharpie markers, and man, he went to town on Cannon, like tatted him up, brought him down like, this is my masterpiece, like my canvas. Look. And I'm looking at him like, Corbin. And then he looks back like, oh, we probably shouldn't have done that. So I cleaned him up the best I could and tucked him in, got him in bed, and then I remember going back and tucking myself in, and I'm in bed, and I remember the night so vividly, I just began bawling before God. And I said, God, I feel like that kid that's been pinned down by the Sharpie mob. People are just writing whatever they want on me. Some of it's true, some of it's not. But at this point, what does it matter? Like, you get to a point in your life that you don't even care anymore. Write whatever you want on me. And here's the truth that I found. I found that God is at the bottom. God's at the bottom. Deuteronomy says it this way: the eternal God is your refuge, and underneath you are the everlasting arms of God. Underneath you. God's at the bottom. And I'm so thankful that in that moment, North Point let me sit at the table and didn't discard me because of my labels. And here's the thing. I'm remarried now and way out of my league, guys. Way. Some of you know my wife, and you're like, he's right. She is. My boys are grown, and doing great things in life. Me and my wife, we have a 6-year-old daughter. She's 6, right? Yeah, I'm just kidding. She's 6. She's Edith. If you haven't met her, you should. She's a spitfire. She'll change your life. She'll change your life. But here's what I know is that God can pick up the broken pieces. He can. He can make something beautiful. And God can enter your story at any moment. And the sooner that you bring him your broken pieces and your labels, the better. And our job is to keep making the table wider and longer. To throw parties for people that need to see Jesus. That's our job. You know, as I read the story about Levi's party, I have to wonder if Zacchaeus was invited. If you've been around North Point for a while, you've probably heard the story of Zacchaeus. We don't have time to unpack it today, but Zacchaeus lived about 80 miles south of Capernaum. He lived in Jericho. Any guesses what he did? He was a tax collector. I don't know if Zacchaeus was at Levi's big party, but there's a really good chance he heard about it. That he heard the story about this rogue rabbi who was inviting just anyone. Anyone. Follow me. Anybody. And so one day when Zacchaeus heard the rabbi was walking his way, maybe you sang that song in church a long time ago, he climbed up in a sycamore tree to see what he could see. And what did Jesus do? He stopped. And he invited him to a table. Do you see it though? Like Luke, he's bookending Jesus' ministry with 2 notorious tax collectors. The biggest sinners in town. Invited to the table to eat with Jesus. And both times the religious people missed it. Look at verse 30. But the Pharisees, the teachers of the law who belonged to their sect, complained to his disciples, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors?" And Jesus answered them, "It's not the healthy who need a doctor. It's not. But the sick. I've come to not call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." Last thing I wrote in your notes is this. Don't let the label keep you from the table. You see, the Pharisees, they could spot everybody's label, but they never noticed their own. They were really good at diagnosing the sin around them, but they never stopped to think that I've got to deal something with the sin inside of me. And so all they could focus on was the labels of other people. And they come to his disciples and they're like, "What are you doing? You follow Jesus? Why are you always sitting at the table with sinners and tax collectors?" And the response is, "That's where Jesus is. It's because that's where Jesus is. That's why we're here." See, Jesus is always at the table of the unqualified and the marginalized, always. And maybe you walked in here today and you're feeling like your label disqualifies you from a seat at the table. I've got really good news for you. You're exactly the kind of person that Jesus would sit with. He'd pull up a seat for you. And we're really glad you're at North Point today. So Jesus strolled into a bustling town. And in the loudest possible way he could, he says, I can forgive the biggest sinner in town. And he did. He forgave Levi. You probably know Levi. But you probably know him by his other name, Matthew. You know, the one who wrote the first gospel of the New Testament, the one who shattered the darkness between the Old Testament, pointing a world to hope in Jesus. That's Levi. And that's the story of Levi. So how big of a sinner can Jesus forgive? I guess that's the question. I don't know. But I know he forgave Levi. So what's your label today? What'd you walk in with? Addict, sellout, failure, cheater, adulterer, rage machine, quitter, biggest sinner in town. I just want to give you the good news of the gospel is that Jesus will sit at the table with you. What's interesting is they gave Jesus a label too. You remember what it was? I'm a friend of sinners. So for Levi, he walked into his ordinary day. And spoke purpose back to him and invited him to a life to follow me. And everything changed. Everything. And he invites you too. See, Jesus doesn't just forgive people, which it's amazing that he does. But he doesn't just forgive people. He restores people. And calls people to a life of following. Some of you walked in carrying labels today that have been spoken over you for years. Some of them maybe that you have spoken over your own life. I'm going to invite you to stand with me if you can. And here's what you need to know today is that your worst moment is not your whole story. It's not. You were made for more. You were made for more than shame, more than survival. You were made for purpose. You were made for a life of following Jesus. We're going to transition to a time of worship, and so instead of rushing out today, we're going to create a moment where we can just dwell in this truth together. Would you worship with me?